Hello everyone, my name is Kerry Ramirez from Studymove. Last week here in Australia, the Department of Education and Training released the April figures on the number of international student enrollments in Australia. Surprisingly, for higher education, the number of international student enrollments in 2020 to April is higher to the same period last year. So we thought it was important to unpack this surprising result and see what trends we can follow and also how these initial results can give us some scenarios on how the end of 2020 is going to look for the international higher education sector here in Australia. Last week, the Department of Education and Training here in Australia provided us with the April figures on international student enrollments. As you can see in the higher education sector, it has been a steady growth of international student enrollments since 2013. And of course, the big question that we had over the last few months was what was going to be the impact of COVID-19 in international student enrollments. Surprisingly, in the same period last year, when we compare it, we actually have now more student enrollments than last year. It's about 4,000 more students enrolled in higher education programs here in Australia. So we need to really unpack this result to really understand and see where is the disruption of COVID-19 in the sector. In order to do this, I think it's very important just to see what are the different ingredients that come in the actual number of student enrollments reported by the Department of Education. Every year and in every period, we actually have two main components. The first one is the actual number of students who are continuing from previous years in their programs. In this case, in this April, is 77% of student enrollments who actually continue from previous years. And 33% this period are actually new students who start from January to April 2020. The main reason why we actually have a higher number of enrollments is because we have a higher number of students progressing and continuing from previous years. Here in Australia, the international education sector, especially at higher education, had very successful years in 2017, 18, and 19. So that cohort of students progressing into 2020 are actually keeping the numbers up. In the other hand, student commencements are actually going down. And this is where we have seen the real disruption of COVID-19. Looking at only commencement figures, we can see that commencements have been growing quite steady in the last few years. But as a result of COVID-19, we experienced a very important decrease on student commencements. It's close to 13% less the number of students, and it's about 12,620 students who did not start their program, most likely because of the effects of COVID-19. Now, when we drill into the numbers of commencements and we look into the top nationalities, we clearly can see that the main disruption happened in the two main markets for Australia, China and India. The number of Chinese students commencing in this period in comparison to 2019 is more than 25% less, and for India is close to 20% less. Interestingly, the other top markets have mixed results, with some markets actually growing the number of commencements. The April data is also very useful to establish some particular scenarios of what we could see for the rest of the year. We know that a large number of student enrollments actually come on the first few months every year. As you can see in these charts, every year we actually see that there is growing commencements, and this is the aggregate numbers year to date, in the first 4 months, and then we have another peak happening in July and August as we have terms happening in the university sector. This is very useful because we know that about 80% of student enrollments actually happen in these first 4 months of the year. So we know that now we can actually have that certainty of 80% enrollment for 2020. And it's really useful because it will help us just to establish some particular scenarios for the rest of 2020. We know that at this stage there are 362,000 international enrollments, which, if let's think about it, like let's see that there is no more enrollments happening, it will take us to a number that is kind of close to the figures that they were reported in 2018. In fact, just to really get the same results as 2018 as an scenario number one, we will need about 35,000 new commencements. This may seem as a really, really big number, but the fact is that in the last 2 years, we actually had about 75,000 commencements in Australia started in the second half of the year. So we really need less than half to reach the numbers that we actually experienced in 2018. A more complicated scenario will be to reach the numbers that we achieved in 2019. That was 441,000 enrollments in 2019. And it's going to be a little bit hard because 2018 was a really, really good year for the international education sector in Australia. And now with COVID-19, it will be very, very unlikely that this will happen. We will need more than 78,000 commencements in the second half of the year to reach this figure. As you can see, the April figures have been very useful to have a better understanding on the impact of COVID-19 in the international education sector. It has been also very useful to establish some particular scenarios that hopefully will allow institutions to make some additional forecasting or to prepare for the budget for 2021. I hope that this information is useful for you and your teams. If you need additional information or you want to get in touch with us to learn more about this, please get in touch with me. My email is kerry@studymove.com, or you can visit our website www.studymove.com. Thank you for your time and take care.